Muy buenos días. Bonjour à vous tous et à vous toutes. Hello, good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are on the planet. Before starting the event, I would like to give a few indication in regards to the interpretation that is given to you in 3 different languages. So please look below your screen. You will see an icon with the planet, and you may select the language of your preference. Bonjour à vous. Une indication logistique avant de faire le départ de cette journée. J'aimerais vous rappeler que vous avez au bas de l'écran un module d'interprétation linguistique, de telle sorte que vous pourrez écouter les présentations dans votre langue de votre choix. Alors, ça se trouve au bas de votre écran. Entonces, para los de ustedes que hablan en español, unas orientaciones breves antes de iniciar con el golpe de inicio. Les quiero recordar que tienen abajo de su pantalla un módulo para la interpretación simultánea. De esta manera pueden elegir el idioma de su preferencia con el servicio de intérpretes. Bueno, vamos entonces.
Okay, then let's start. Let me introduce myself. My name is Sylvain Goudreau, Regional Coordinator of the Education for Employment Program for Colleges and Institutes Canada, SICAN. I will be, once again, this is the 4th webinar, as a facilitator to help you through this event that has been very interesting, not only on my behalf, but I also speak on behalf of SICAN's staff and our friends from Pacific Alliance. So my best wishes. Have a very good day of work. Let me remind you that today, November 18th, is a very interesting moment to close our Environmental Sustainability Forum, because from the year 2002, the UNESCO, the UNESCO, the United Nations Organization for Education, Science and Culture, has set forth that this day is the Philosophy World Day. So this Greek word that leaves love to wisdom, the study of nature and correct or incorrect behavior. Said in the same words of the UNESCO, philosophy will give us conceptual baseline for the principles and values upon which world peace depends: democracy, human rights, justice, equality, and environmental sustainability, of course, which is what we are here for in the last 4 weeks. It is then fit like a glove. It fits like a glove today to finish our exploration process and dialogue in these 4 webinars. the best day to do so. Let me remind you that we have an interpretation services, so we have to try to speak a little bit slower so that our dear interpreters can do their job and benefit all the participants. The first 3 webinars have dealt with, first of all, the actions for the environmental impact reduction in the extractive scope. Then, the second week, November 4th, we talked about the development of human capital with environmental perspective in education and technical and professional training, and also in the extractive sector, of course. The third webinar, which was November 11th, that means Thursday last week, we talked about consultative processes and reconnaissance systems for good environmental management. All of those have been recorded, such as the one we have today, and that means that we can listen to them again and maybe share with your colleagues, if you deem it appropriate, some of the main talks or discussion panels. Let me remind you that in these other webinars, we have had the chance, or at least you have been invited to do so, to fill the survey, satisfaction survey. So if you have not done yet, you can still do it. You have time. And you can find, and you saw it at the beginning in our session today, a QR code that meant that you had a chance to download from that QR the program for today, the agenda. We have also sent to your email address a guideline of what we are going to be dealing with today and the way in which we are going to be dealing with, which will be a little bit different from what we have had in these 3 last webinars. Today, I should say that we are lucky enough to have 693 members who have been enrolled in this forum. Today is our final session, and I would like to invite you to participate through our social networks, so you can always share with others and extend this network, as we have always done in these last weeks. So this is the end of my part, and I wish a very enriching experience of this virtual forum. With no further ado, it is my privilege to present our first political authority for the opening session of our 4th and last webinar. I'm talking about Maria Carolina Schmidt Saltiva. She is head of the Department of Environment in Chile, and her objective within this department is quite clear. The only way of achieving sustainable development is to incorporate care and respect for the environment. Minister Schmidt was also president of COP25, and in that role, she is leading the boost at the international program of climatic action needs. Among the priorities of her administration is the approval of the enactment of the law that creates the Service of Biodiversity and protected areas in the upper chamber in Chile, as well as the fostering for the National Plan for Wetlands Protection, which goes from 2018 to 2022. So, dear Mrs. Minister, we would like to welcome.
Muy buenos días a todas y todos.
Good morning, everyone, and especially the organizers of the Intersectoral Forum for Environmental Sustainability in the Extractive Sector from the Pacific Alliance and Canada. First of all, let me remind you that we are certainly supporting the roadmap for the plastic sustainable management, which means that we are going to be fostering and also supporting this initiative. Chile has echoed this summon, and as a matter of fact, in June this year, we launched our own national roadmap to the circular economy, which means the transformation master plan from an economy that is zero waste. The deep transformation, that means to move towards a development model that is circular in Chile, demands from a point of view that reaches consensus on a long-term basis that has been set in this roadmap. So today we have set 7 specific goals with measurable and very ambitious goals that enable us to move forward urgently towards a circular energy and zero waste. This initiative is also added to the act that eliminated the plastic bags of trades in Chile, which was chosen as the best public policy in 2019 by all our citizens, as well as the new law that is regulating and banning the single-use plastic in Chile, and that is going to be enforced, as a matter of fact, in February next year. On the same token, through the implementation of the Extended Producer Responsibility Act, which we call REP, we have sustained a new way of recycling in Chile so as to have the home waste withdrawal in our whole territory, all along our country, which means that we can multiply by 5 our recycling rates in domiciliary or home waste. That means that the private sector is also key, and we have designed along with them some measures. First of all, we have eco-labeling for packagings. That means elige reciclar or choose to recycle, and which reports in a very clear manner the true recyclability of all different containers. Up to date, we have more than 1,300 of plastic consumption that have already been certified as eco-labeled, and we are going to push them forward this mandatory legislation. Also, all the pacts or covenants that we have signed, the third one will be launched in the year 2019 around the world, and we set voluntary goals for the leading companies in our country, so that in 2025, 100% of plastic packaging in Chile is all of them recyclable, reusable, or compostable. This is just a snapshot with the main actions that we are undertaking to move forward towards a circular economy in Chile. We are talking about a long-term endeavor, but which will enable us to move forward towards a development that is truly sustainable. I wish you the best of the sessions today, and that this idea could be an input for the discussion that we will have today, and hopefully also the inspiration so that the work that each one of us is undertaking could be fruitful for this such challenging but needed transformation towards circular economy around the world. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you very much, Minister Schmidt, for your opening words and for the dynamic ideas you have shared with us, and also because you are also sharing and backing up everything that we are doing today. So thank you very much, Madam Minister, for your participation today. Okay, today we will have 11 panel members coming back to our sessions for 2 specific subgroup working sessions. The first one will be based on subject matters, on themes, and the other one per country. So to be able to have a quality type of work, we have needed to reduce the amount of participants to only the ones who I'm speaking to, while all other participants have been invited to be connected towards or through our plenary session in the live feed of YouTube, which is what we are broadcasting as we speak. Hence, for all of those, we would like to say hello and thank you for your interest and commitment. We will now talk about the first working session in theme groups. What we would like to have is that during this session, we might obtain one of many of collective building through the input or based on the input of the speeches we have already heard, and of course, the experience of each participant. It's 48 today, only 48, which means that we will be able to interact very fruitfully with very high quality and also a different approach. Our main objective is to enrich dialogue and allow for an exchange between people from the different countries, from the Pacific Alliance and Canada. The specific objectives for this first session in themes are: first, generate a more personalized access to panel members and experts. We'd also like to generate this conversation area towards the implementation challenges of all the matters that we have dealt with in a specific reality and one that pertains to each participant with the contribution of the panel members who are the experts. Many times we listen to experts in conferences and it sounds quite nice, but in this case, we need to have the implementation in a different context, in a different country, with different culture, and with an entrepreneurial and educational fabric that is also different. And that is where the challenge is. Then this new approach would lead us to touch in a very humble but honest manner all these implementation challenges. We would also like to have recommendations for such implementation. That is the idea behind it, so that we can get some of you, not only the panel members, but also many of you have been working in this area for many years. And then you can give us recommendations to the rest of the participants on which are the main steps, the first steps, which is also the leadership, the correct one maybe, and the way in which we might cluster other partners so as to work in an intersectorial manner and to try not to replicate our efforts. These synergies are the ones that we want to set forth. And we would also like to strengthen our mutual support networks and also dialogue between different stakeholders, countries and sectors that might be from the state, the empresarial world, entrepreneurial world, or the civil society, private, in other words, and civil society. Everyone has something to say and contribute with. The last objective of this first working session in subgroups is to promote the dialogue between, among, I would say, all of us, all the different subject matters. So we are going to now go to smaller groups. We will still have simultaneous interpretation system. Let me remind you then the importance once again. Let me reiterate that we need to speak slowly at the right pace to make the work of our 16 interpreters easier. We will have today. On this chat line, we also shared a PDF document. So our dear technical group, please cut and paste this again, because in this PDF document, you will be able to click on the link to your group. It could be panel A, B, or C. You will be hosted by members of our SICAN team and maybe one or two representatives of the technical group, Environment and Green Growth for the Pacific Alliance, as well as panel members that will be waiting for you to have this dialogue that might be more personalized of 45 minutes. After that time, you will be brought back. You will have to come back to our larger room for a plenary session. Each group will have 5 minutes to share the main milestones of we have discussed. The link that you will be using to go back here is the same one that you have received by mail. So go ahead, have a good day, and I'll see you back in 50 minutes. If you have any difficulties when choosing those subgroups, you might stay here and you will be receiving help from Christian, Maud, and Mariela. Go ahead.
Ready? Ready? 55 are back. Okay, we will go for it. Let's go for the plenary session. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. to this large, and we have many virtual rooms, and this is part of the learning process of continuous education, learning about this technology, and manipulate it and go from one side to the other. Congratulations to everyone for respecting time and for the conversation, and also we will give each subgroup 5 minutes to share of what has been done, what has been shared, and would like to ask you to think that if you have been in a different subgroup, maybe you could be interested in one or other subgroups. So take notes of everything, of the synergies, and what are the interests of some people, and the panel members, and if there is a country or partners that are manifesting greater interest. So it is important. We have this subgroup as a country, and should not, well, stay in their own country. They can go to another country. And also some partners that are interested in the good practice and the experience that has been shared. And also in influence in the other areas. Why don't we mix them up? So we would like to start. Luis Ledesma and the Ministry of the Environment in Peru, and that have been the Secretary of Group B. And I would like to start with you. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for allowing us to speak. Would like to thank the organizers and for attending in this last session of the forum. I would like to share some issues that were discussed in the group, and human capital with environmental perspective. And the format. And yes. Well, in principle, it has been very interesting, the exchange of experience, support, and comments around this area, focusing on the perspective of the environmental area. This session initiated following the experience, a constant exchange in the areas, in the academic area, the industry, governmental area, and the importance of creating spaces. So the students that are in a training stage or educational stage, they need to understand how they will apply their knowledge obtained during their study period. And once they go to labor life, they need to know how to apply this. One of the elements that was pointed out in this experience is that it should be done in a periodic way, and with the students, the student groups, the industry, and representatives of the government. They need to develop curriculums that will be aligned to these specificities identified by the industry as well as the public sector. Then we have pointed out the importance of generating within the institutions, especially the officials, is to consider the gender perspective. And they pointed out an important point, a complex point, and changing the way of thinking. And this is something that has already been established. We have pointed out the importance of training children in the area so they can participate in environmental programs on the areas and in the importance and also in applied learning and generating awareness. And then in a contaminated way, and the students need to have a full involvement and learning and the importance of learning and putting all this into practice, especially in this initial stage, And it is important to point out that we need to change a paradigm. And it is important to develop the perspective and just to develop this beyond the technical knowledge. It is important to normalize the importance of prevention and care. And as an optimum point, to close this, so we took the importance, the programs, studies, and the environmental areas. A cross-cut knowledge throughout different areas, and for the development of the students, so the students can have skills and tools that will be useful for their labor life and the importance of the industry and the environment, and not only learn from what it exists already, but to look for ways and development. These would be the most important points. Thank you, Luis. Thank you so much. It's so fruitful, organized. It has been very positive. Any possibility, technical possibility, if any of the participants that have questions to the comment, just raise your hand and activate your microphones. However, there is no possibility of turning on your cameras. But you are able to do that and to talk and share some questions, comments on what has been presented by our friend, Luis. Okay. We can take the questions later if there are no questions right now. Now we would like to go to our presenter, Miguel Perez, and that is here with us and observing or watching this conversation in Group A. Sylvain, if you allow me, Miguel had a problem. It will be very difficult to show this, so he will only read because he's in with his cell phone. And then we will send that spreadsheet. Well, maybe we can give him 5 more minutes and we can switch and go for someone else And we can go to group C. No, sorry to interrupt, but I have not been able to log in with my computer. Yes, but other people can share their screen with the document. Liana, you can share your screen. Yes, give us 5 minutes. Of course, give us 5 minutes. And if you put it at the end, we have the notes and I can put it on the screen. Yes, the document is in a SharePoint, so you can look for the simplest way to have access. So you're okay? You have 5 minutes? And we can go back to group C. We will go to group C now, Vicente Montoya and Semarnat from Mexico. Go ahead, Moises.
Thank you very much, Sylvain. Welcome everyone, to each one of you. On behalf of subgroup C, we worked on consultative processes and recognition systems for good environmental practices. The discussion that we held enabled us to have coin certain ideas that I'm going to point out during my answer. In this case, Sylvain, should I share? Is that okay? Just as Luis Ledesma did from Peru? Yes, if you want to. You're free to do so. And if not, you can continue just with your talk. Okay, let me just continue like this without sharing my screen then, because I have the following writing. The key factors for the success in the sustainable implementation of consultative processes and recognition system of good environmental practices should include having a contribution at a macro level, which will enable us to work in specific actions with the private sector and also with the dependencies of the government. Amongst the challenges that we are facing from the civil society when having this vision at a macro level, we can see that there's a coordination with the entrepreneurial services, all the changes in infrastructure and technology, integrating universities, local governments, as well as productive local segments, such as, for example, fishermen's organization, as civil societies. And we should also contain the desire of moving forward in a fast pace, having or bringing, giving room to building trust at a local level, such as poverty, marginalized areas, and others, which are related to a circular economy. Now, in regards to the relationship between government and local communities or indigenous communities, it is essential to devote some time to work in collaboration with our local indigenous communities, and also making sure that we have the opportunity of contributing to any policy or program. Transparency and honesty in those government agencies is essential so as to be successful in our programs and policies. In the Canadian experience, we have been for 15 years working with such communities. And finally, in order to be binding, we needed to do it in a more human basis with mining companies and local communities, meaning concentrating in the whole landscape, which means that the natural environment should be a key stakeholder, and this includes local communities. We should also see as a need that mining companies invest in cleaner technologies and good practices, such as water recirculation in the productive processes. Among the challenges that this vision entails, we look at the following. First, getting a company to understand that they have to do some follow-up to the actions that they are going to be implementing. In other words, after an environmental audit, companies tend to forget follow-up. Companies should have an environmental management system in case we have any issues regarding their environmental practices. And then those companies sometimes neglect what's important, which is the environment, to work on the urgent areas for them, which is production. Based on the resources that we are seen as demanded, less companies have surveillance, environmental surveillance to monitor their actions. The exchange of experience with other mining communities is also needed. Not every company is communicated to each other. That means that it's not in the network, which might be translated into negative results when we are facing environmental disasters. The final point is that mining is not on its own, it's not isolated. The synergies could be amongst the mining companies, but they could also include productive companies from other areas. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Moises. How interesting. Everything you mentioned is interesting. And you gave us a really interesting coverage of every aspect, presenting the points of view that are, for example, in the practice of interest with different stakeholders. So where partners come from, etc. So I would say that that point, the acknowledgement or recognition of good environmental practices, we have moved forward in the last project that SICAN did in Peru with trying to bring the Ministry of Education or the Environment Ministry to try to generate some kind of standard that has called Eco Seal or Green Seal for the recognition of excellence with different organizations that might be predominant in this area, environmental concern. So there's a lot of work to do. And we also like to thank you for the summary that you have shared with us. There are any questions from participants for Group C? If not, well, we can prepare your questions for the end of our session, but we would like go to Group A with our friend Miguel Perez from the Ministry of Colombia, Ministry of Environment of Colombia. Miguel, go ahead. Okay, I am going to share the screen now.
Voy a abrir un poco más. Miguel, te dejo la palabra.
Un poco más todavía, Eliana.
Más grande todavía.
Sí, gracias.
Okay.
Perfecto, Eliana, muchísimas gracias.
Okay, Eliana, thank you very much.
Con las buenas prácticas,
We can start with good practices and some challenges. Go ahead. Success factors and challenges. Okay, this is just a summary, of course, of our conversation. Go ahead, Miguel. Thank you, Eliana. This session was very important. We talked about different matters, such as, for example, Rosana Diaz from the Ministry of Environment in Peru talked about the point that the Peru was a little bit behind in public policies and the standards compared to other countries. And that she considered that it was key to all of us that the country would be incorporated here, that it would be generating public policies on plastic.
Información científica. Ellos
and also scientific information.
Representante del ministerio.
They sent a representative to the UN as well, so that they could have access. They had access to that information, and they also had the possibility of having a different weight in our policies and formulation of those policies. So I think that was an interesting point. My friend here, Carlos Jairo Ramirez, mentioned that in this case, we were the pioneers on formulating the circular economy at a national level. It was also mentioned that it is important that we could see that those in the territories, it's important that we get there, but it's also important in the multi-sectors area. So for every stakeholder that is linked to the standards as well as implied in the implementation of public policies. So the case in Colombia is quite valuable. And we could see that there were research institutes and others at a public level, as well as others, such as main offices. So this area of having different sectors is really important to us. Now, this idea was repeated over and over all along the session. As a matter of fact, Jorge Sangüesa from Chile mentioned that there had been some private working tables with the companies looking for specific solutions, and also adding other stakeholders that might be involved here. Now, on the other hand, Pierre Cartier talked about the importance of mobilizing other stakeholders, but also, of course, education and moving the civil society or alluring them. Going back to Carlos, my co-worker in the Ministry of Education, with the example of the circular economy, it is very important to point at the communications, because we need to communicate all those things to our citizens and also the citizenship participation or culture. Rodrigo Murillo from Mexico was telling us that there are some stakeholders that are kind of reluctant, and that for those ends, it is very important that the ones who are undertaking those environmental public policies are also brokers or the intermediate link, so that we can also include economic activities, of course, but thinking about the environment, more into regulation or more than being sanctionatory, to be this mediator, as I would say, or a broker, someone intermediating. He was also mentioning that in the mining areas, it is also important to train or to have cooperations at a technical level. For example, with Chile, there are different aspects, of course, related to mining where they are strong at. And finally, Jonathan, that came to our session, also mentioned that there are some declarations in plastic handling, and there are some roadmaps to do so. So that's why it's very important that other countries stated very clearly and know that different scenarios, such as the Pacific Alliance, also have these technical papers where we want to look at. Those were the main practices or policies that we talked about. The success factors, I kind of mentioned it already, which is a systemic movement in a collaborative manner. For example, Roxana was mentioning that we should talk about a circular economy that is also inclusive, where we will be able to work with vulnerable organizations. And my friend from the Ministry of those affairs talked about that we understand that everyone is trying to get into those issues. They are in vogue, things such as environmental payments, and that's part of the culture in our general citizenship, in their participation. And also that we do not see one single application of the policies, but that we can count on different mechanisms to implement this policy. It's also key, the responsibility of the citizens for the implementation of any other policy.
Challenges is to move forward towards climate change and on emerging issues as the companies and the governments. And what we need to do is to deal with this. This is not a subject for all actors, as Jorge was saying, making emphasis on this. And This is not only an economic problem, but it is a problem that of public health. And it is key is civil society, entrepreneurs, and their concrete, specific, measurable in actions that are dealing to results. And these are the main issues. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you so much. Thank you for the summary. And I would like to remind you all that this table summarizing what has been talked about will feed the report of the event. And that will be improved, and it will be part of a report that will be thorough, detailed, and that you will have access, of course, for that. And following the timeline, we will continue to the next group work, and we will leave the questions for the end. And we will go to the next. And the second session and subgroup is called geographic, and that means per country. The main objectives are the following: and identify good practices and policies of the greatest interest, the greatest relevance for each country, taking into account, of course, priorities in administration and central government administration and the ministry, and the participants connected are from higher education. And this is everything seen and heard, and we have to take some time in the next subgroup because we need to see which are the ones that are a priority, which are the ones that are only for one country, and see if there is a possibility of synergies, mutual support, one same country. And the second objective is to identify the next steps, follow up, exchange. And I would like to invite you to see this in a horizon of 16 months and almost a year and a half. And the time we're working on the forum and in the group of work fostered by SICAN during time, the employment of the Alliance for the Pacific, and in March 2023. The third objective is to promote dialogue and collaboration. And if at the time of the plenary session it would be important and interesting, and to hear all the countries, to see if there are priorities, possibilities. And now the technical team, please share the next PDF where you will find the links of the rooms of the subgroup per country. And we will establish sometime. Instead of working for 45 minutes, I would like to invite you to go for 35 minutes of work, 35 minutes of work, and you can see your watches because we have different time zones. So it's 35 minutes, and that would be the time. That would be the time. We have to see in the chat. And then we have facilitators on SICAN and some presenters of feedback on the technical environment and growth. And we will meet again soon. Thank you.
Vamos entonces. Mira, bienvenidos de vuelta a esta plenaria, esta segunda plenaria.
Welcome back to this plenary session to share the feedback, what we have identified as priorities in each country. And I would like to reiterate that everything that is going to be shared are not commitments. Also the chiefs and the high authorities, and exploring the different possible priorities to be able to do a follow-up and to facilitate. We will start with Group A. And Nile, Dinet, and Sican. And the Ministry of Felipe Cortes, the Ministry of the Environment of Chile, has been identified as a secretary, so he will be presenting and to share everything that has been talked about. Felipe? Is Felipe there? Okay, yes, we hear you. Thank you, Sylvain. Good afternoon. And now we're here in the plenary session and Felipe Cortes, and I work at the Ministry of the Environment, and the conclusions and the participants in the group of Chile. I will share my screen. Please, 1 second. Now, in summary, we have many contributions and different services in Chile, public services. Please make a zoom so we can read this.
Ok. Espero que se vea. Bueno, en resumen, hablamos de varios temas.
In summary, we talk about different issues and many interventions regarding the incorporation and the free trade agreements Chile has in negotiation, as well as the incorporation and participation of Perez and pointed out a forum of cooperation of Asia Pacific in November 29, and also having participation of the government of Canada, and vision and collaboration, and we need to have a broad view on the environmental policy and support participation of the country in different forums, and this is relevant priority to have a collaboration in the establishment of a broad vision of the environmental policy in different forums and the generation of synergies in different services and environmental competencies. In the second place, talked about the establishment of multi-sectorial groups and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile, coordination, the coordination of different public services, civil society, to have a balanced vision in negotiation and in the case of the Table of Oceans and Fishing and how it has collaborated into the strategy and relevant multi-sectorial approach in the public policy and that data, which is quantitative information. It's important, the development of technical capacity, cooperation, international cooperation, generating synergies in different public services and civil society. On the side of the Ministry of Education of Chile, we had many initiatives, and some of them is the work of the implementation of that service at a local level, mitigation, adaptation, and going towards the school model and go for the younger population, commitments of different regions, involvement of the school community, mitigation, climate crisis, and it is an alliance of the ministry with the B company that will generate a network for large size institutions worldwide and generate habits of energy efficiency, establish a ranking too for those that have the best performance. Also talked about the experience of the program of environmental ambassadors and programs to influence among the classmates, generate awareness, change of behavior. It is relevant to say that the implementation is concrete, specific implementation, public policy, integration of relevant abilities, skills, improving performance and standardized tests, continuous implementation, synergies with the public and private sector. And this is what we saw during the activity. I'd like to thank everyone for contribution. I had to talk about the different public policy of the Ministry of the Environment is currently implementing plastic management and the implementation of the extended responsibility of the producer, which is a law now priority, and the plastic bags in stores, and the regulation on the plastics, one-use plastic, and a new initiative, a new international initiative that we hope to receive next year on plastic through the ministry. Through the ministry, we have been supporting that with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I don't want to take any more time, but this is all the contributions that we had. Thank you so much. Thank you, Felipe. Thank you. It's in time. 5 minutes. And we have the group of Colombia and Miguel Perez from the Ministry of the Environment of Colombia, and has been supported by Ileana Gallardo, facilitator of SICAM. Thank you so much. Connected again with my cell phone. Well, we were mainly connected we were two in this geographic group, and we presented many subjects, Colombia, other countries, Latin American countries, the national strategies in circular economy, and with our partner in the ministry. And we pointed out this relevant practice and policy of interest and of different activities, and that has the relation with the human impact. It has all the issues of climate change, green growth, sustainable economy, and Colombia has specific goals, a process, and we recognize Chile as a country that can find certain type of technical cooperation that has moved forward in this area, as we said before. Eliana will start showing. And as you see here in the table, we have different synergies and different actors, key actors. Colombia and Chile have agreement among the goals and objectives. And what it has been, they have been saying about the general terms in plastic for 2030 that will be reutilized. And also with Peru that have participated in certain horizontal dialogue. And as a second good practice, we had deforestation. It's an aspect. Colombia is once again, the Colombian government has high expectations, high interest. Can you hear me okay? Okay. And in the deforestation, Colombia has high stakes there, and the resources in finishing deforestation in the Amazon area, and a general policy to face deforestation in the Amazon in Peru. And with the implementation of a monitoring system, there should be planning, strategic planning, so as to intervene the areas that are in deforestation and areas illegal, and a valuable strategy, and also in the forest conservation. And these are the practices that we recognize. One-way plastic usage in Peru. Yes, one-way plastic use in law in Peru. And that's what we captured from our Peruvian partners. Thank you so much. Sorry, Miguel, I thought you were going to share. That's why I did not share immediately. Okay, thank you so much, Miguel and Eliana, for this summary. We would now go to the next subgroup of Mexico, and that has been facilitated by Bridget with Moises Hernandez, and would like to share with you that we had the presence of Mr. Efrain Alba, the Secretary of Economy. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presence at that group and the event. Thank you, Sylvain. And thank you. Thanks to all the participants of the groups from Mexico and the subgroup of this country. Subgroup, and we identified two main aspects. First, the challenge and good practice, and the interventions, and that we should share the challenges. First, a culture focused on the environment, activities done with the engineers and other professionals, and dedicated to mining. And educational sector is a main sector for sustainable development. Participants from Mexico agreed that they need to evaluate and strengthen what is done around the environmental culture in the universities, specifically in the dual modality and also in bilingual education. Working with green programs are very important, and they include the green care and care of water. The culture of the environment should be based from the basic levels of education, so they would understand the concept of sustainability, which is a concept that favors technology development. It is fundamental to transform the mindset regarding mining, and including mining that minimizes the environmental impact. This has to be supported by the government of Mexico, and the goal is to set up goals committed to the environment. We need to reinforce the space for political participation of local authorities in an industry that should participate further in applied research, understood as a community, including the industry, community, educational sector, and others, in which Canada is a leader. And going to the good practice, well, we have to identify this by the Group of Mexico. I would like to mention the following: certification executed by the environmental area of Profepa. It's a great element to show that a mining company meets environmental standards. Certification can also be expanded and considered as an activity if they certify the staff and the institutions of higher education. They play an important role because they are able to certify in environmental areas as well as corporate responsibilities. And that could include the workers of the mining industry as well as the students. It is important to teach the companies to meet the objectives of sustainable development. And they facilitate and will have interaction with other companies and organizations in good practices at an international level. And this is it. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much, Moises. Then we will have the last group, which is the geographical group coming from Peru, that was facilitated by Vicente Montoya. And we also have our own team supported by Luis Ledesma from the Ministry of Environment in Peru. So Luis, the floor is yours. Go ahead. Sergio will be the one that will help us on this rapporteur task. Thank you very much. I will be the one sharing with you some of the things that we have mentioned in the group in Peru. Let me start with saying that at the very beginning, we talked about the sustainable management of plastics, which is a very important idea that has been developed so far by our countries in our region in the Pacific Alliance. And one of the important points that we mentioned here is that, well, we have the importance that rules and regulations that are being issued right now could be worked with in terms of research, because there are some alternatives that before used to be the best possible alternatives or the most sustainable ones could today end up by not being so. It was also important for us, and we highlighted to have the right ecosystem with the database that would help us generate policies that could, at the end of the day, be applied in our countries. And of course, bringing as a benchmark the best practices that we can find in other regions in the world. We also wanted to point at, well, related to sustainable management of plastics for handling, that in Peru, we can see that there is the flow of communication in stakeholders is quite good, not considering the government, which is also very important to us because we're talking about the single-use plastic, different dialogue tables, for example, or areas where we have been exchanging information on the progress we have had so far in different regulations. Another important item that we worked through was the importance of the sensibilization campaigns or awareness campaigns in our countries, which means things that are related to sustainable control and the participation of all actors or all stakeholders. We also acknowledged the key stakeholders for plastic management have worked with us, have been the recyclers associations, and it is very important to try to foster their formal processing. Also, green certifications in the extractive sectors, and these areas I would like to promote best practices that are friendlier with our environment and sustainable. Those would be the key points that we identified in our group. Thank you.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias, Sergio.
Thank you very much, Sergio.
Una gira de los
This is then a round of the 4 countries, so thank you very much to all of you. I'm sure the recordings will help us to complement these notes that we have taken and the summaries. And the person who is now in our agenda today is the person who is in charge of or drafting this report. So let me invite now our consultant and environmental expert of our program, educational for the Pacific Alliance, and that is also part of SICAN's team, Israel Avila, who will share his observations about our forum in general, with considering the 4 webinars. So Israel, the floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you, Sylvain. Thank you very much for all the participants in Chile. My voice doesn't sound that nice in French, so let me go back to Spanish. We have had intense but successful areas in our seminars, in our forums, in the extractive sector, regulation, and technical and professional training. As we have seen during the discussion of our forum, we have seen how relevant our environment concerns have been from different points of view. We have talked about the importance of training with an environmental perspective, of course, a good implementation of public policies, research or investigation, and very specific actions to reduce environmental impacts. All these areas, all these talks that we have heard have strengthened our commitment in care for environment, and not only from the government, but also from the civil society, private and educational areas. That's how we have open dialogue channels and also some others that will help us to reflect. We have also heard in this last webinar the experts and speakers on those panel members having certain dialogue and exchanging ideas on their experiences for sustainable management. These experiences have also led us to have a very clear scenario of how we're working on these different efforts, and specifically talking about the Pacific Alliance countries and Canada. I would like now to bring you some hard data and some conclusions also that we have collected during this forum as a whole, in these 4 webinars, I mean. Based on the context that we are a very diverse group, not only in geographical terms, but also in social labor works with different responsibilities and interests as well. I would like to acknowledge that it's a challenge to talk or exchange our ideas that deal with sustainable environment. But in all the talks that we have heard, we have identified great progress that we might share afterwards with all the countries that have been involved, and also strengthening the progress in other countries as well. Some of those key factors that have been identified during our talks is webinar A, Actions for the Reduction of Environmental Concerns. We have that there are some regulatory frameworks about plastic, single-use plastic, with the purpose of reducing the scale to the environment level and bringing them down also to the area that we need for cleaner ecological perspectives. We also talked about a neutral program from the 2050 through voluntary agreements to all stakeholders, companies, and identifying incentives for the reduction of our footprint. From that perspective, we can also see that the development of our territories with a great social value is key to generate consensus and policies, since it's also calling us or bringing us to think about the different stakeholder strategies needed to sort out the problems in the environment and social areas. At the same time, the success of integrated management of water through the citizens' participation. At the same time, we also talked about remediation, ecological remediation as a best practice, as well as other improvements in good water management are crucial. In the webinar B from Human Capital, some of the conclusions or recommendations we obtained are as follows. We analyzed the competencies, and this meant to be very successful for human training, human capital through education for sustainability. Also, the one that is graded on competencies is based in developed to do. It has enabled us to have values and environmental that has been updated and required in our markets. This educational model has brought us the opportunity of reducing the access gap to technological information, which also helps students to have access to updated information for the best academic training. On the same token, we have also heard about some long-term policies that have been adapted to the national agendas with the sustainability focus and its impact towards a better quality of life. On the other hand, the application of tools for the technical studies or scientific studies that are related as an objective to mitigate and restore the possible environmental impacts and reduce the negative effects towards the environment and human health. Also, the diagnosis and generation of information of baseline for the implementation of public policies that are adequate to our local realities with a very interesting perspectives and involvement. We also stress on the importance on the fight against climate change and new energies, non-conventional or non-conventional energies by the sustainable management. And of course, we cannot leave aside applied research in environment care to generate scientific knowledge and exerting that in the environment where we are working in. In terms of the webinar C, which was about consultative processes and recognition systems for good management, some of the conclusions or recommendations are as follows. We saw the process in detail for good methodologies such as audits to obtain green certifications in the extractive sector, and also the importance of good management in environmental and workplace health and protection, and also some other things such as to avoid maybe to be contagious in base or because of COVID-19. Some other environmental policies were seen as part of the protocols and indicators for the communities and environments and climate change. At the same time, we also saw the contribution of circular economy in the sustainable management of plastics in the extractive sector and waste management. We should not forget the fostering of synergies for all the stakeholders in the public policies that have been integrated according to their national context. In this last webinar, if we talk about plenary sessions, we reached to the following observations. We have identified so far 13 good practices or policies that have been interesting because they have been replicated by other actors as well. In A, we see that we have public policies in the extractive sector that are quite sound and that can be replicated. We can also see that there is access to scientific information, and that is key to all of us so that we can have access to information in the scientific areas. It's also important to see that we can go through the proposal with certain companies that are called public-private partnerships, looking for specific solutions and different stakeholders. At the same time, it is also important to point out the importance of incorporating green ecology in the extractive sector, as well as also removing the actors such as the students who have environmental areas and have not been sensitized based on the incorporation of from the civil society.
Tenemos que la vinculación del ámbito
In B,
académico
we have the academic scope on the environment areas.
importante. Asimismo, también se generó la sensibilidad.
We also based our sensitization for the institutions and other areas under the same perspectives of gender and also the prevention in the environment with the incorporation of our students associations, basically children in the environmental programs. We can also see how important is the development of applied research or education in the environmental areas. Adding different programs, specializations, such as tools that come from a formative stage, also include the existing processes, be concentrated in global citizenship. And in C, we saw that there was this circular economy so as to have a macro reading and work globally in the private sector, and also with the dependencies of the government. That this is based in one area of our civil society.
There should also be a relationship of the government, environmental, and it is essential to dedicate time to work with the local communities and ensure that they have the opportunity to contribute. And there so is the importance the mining companies and the local communities, and that is dedicated to resources and then environment, and that implies that the company and that's a way to achieve a more sustainable mining. Help with geographic groups. We have some strengths detected in the case of Chile in collaboration and in representation of different forums, multilateral forums. And in the case of Colombia, there are the case of Colombia and also in circular economy. In the case of Mexico, a good practice and public policies in the mine sector at a first world levels. In the case of Peru, so plastics, sustainable development of plastics, and in this area or interactive space, different indicators to achieve that, and in hydric resources, and also invest in the area of research. Challenges, implementation, the culture of the environment, and the exchange of dialogue, and they were also identified as an opportunity of the government, civil society. Likewise, they fostered the circular economy for different business opportunities and the strengthening of the public policies, environmental policies. We have seen the interest of some participants and pointing out the important collaboration, technical collaboration. And in the case of the public and private area, there needs to be public and private tables from the civil aspect to the companies in a specific case, and also in the Ministry of the Environment of Peru. Well, these are some of the things said that we will be sharing the final report of the forum. This focus the exchange of ideas and the different angles they bring in, the experiences, exchange of ideas, solutions, reflections, thoughts that will bring us together into a more sustainable sector and aware of the environment. Care, respect for the environment is a task for everyone as a society because it's our legacy, not only for us, but our children and future generations. I would like to thank everyone, those that have shared their experience and knowledge in the forum, and I take the opportunity to tell you that in the last 4 weeks of the forum is that over with this event. Now I would like to invite my colleague Bridget Shea, that is in charge of the responsible program and a component dedicated to the regional areas, that will explain to you what are the activities after the forum. Thank you, Israel. I'm very happy to share with you the activities post-forum that we have planned for the last year and a half of the program, and the closure is for March 31st, 2023, directed to achieving the results. And these are the following. And in the first place, after the forum, will be publishing a report and a memory of all the process developed, and that will imply shared information of the 4 webinars of the forum, in which we're going to deal with the conclusions and recommendations exposed. This document wants to become a document for information, dissemination of information as a tool, as a useful tool to continue with the dialogue, analysis, reflection, and thoughts on the subjects in the forum. The report will be shared with each of you and panel members, participants, and all the partners of the program. Secondly, in the program, we have a group of work, sustainability, and at a national level, in each of the 4 countries of the Pacific Alliance, and at a regional level, consolidating collaboration with the technical team, the environment, and the green movement of the Pacific Alliance. We will continue strengthening this important subject on employment of the Pacific Alliance, and we will concentrate on work that wants to deepen into identification, systematization, and good practices, guidelines, and recommendations, environmental recommendations from the forum, so as to foster the implementation. And finally, to conclude, we would like to develop other activities in the last year, activities on training, so we can continue strengthening the competencies of the national actors and the implementation of such policies, good practices, guidelines through our workshops and other mechanisms, starting from dialogue with the countries. Thank you so much, Sylvain. Thank you. And you, I can take the floor to introduce the closure words from the political authorities. Thank you, Bridget. Okay, now we have reached the end of our forum of sustainability, environmental sustainability in the Pacific Alliance and Canada. Good practices and policy in the extractive area and in the technical training. I have the great pleasure of presenting, introducing to you our next authority, connecting from the Mexico City for the closing words, and not only the webinar, but our whole forum. Donatio Herrera Gutierrez, currently taking the position of Undersecretary to Foster and Standard Regulation in the Environmental Secretariat and natural resources in Mexico. He was the director of the technical coordination and planning, and in the trust of the mine fostering area, has also worked in different areas, among which has been a teacher at the Faculty of Economy at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and the Institute of Economic Sciences and Administrative Sciences of the Autonomous University of the state of Hidalgo in Mexico. Dear Undersecretary, welcome. The floor is yours. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Would like to greet all the attendants to this forum, good practices and policies, specifically to the representative of the public sector, social sector in Canada, and all the countries integrating the Pacific Alliance, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Peru. Would also like to thank all the institutes in Canada, the agencies being this forum one of the main activities. And would like to greet those that have made all this possible. Sustainability in mining is controversial. We have the need on the extractive system in mining, in modern life, and transition, energy transition. However, we know that the projects have a great impact at a local level. So globally, this is a contradiction, and at a local level, there are very, very high impacts that need to be controlled by the local authorities throughout these countries. That is water, the change of the soil, and to make it sustainable. To make it sustainable, we need to do different activities. What are the elements that we consider a way of dealing with these issues? Well, we have, and it is important to say, we have the issue of society, and we think that not only to consider that is an authorization to allow the communities where these activities are done can have a voice and have a reasonable benefit. And that's why in Mexico, we will be moving forward in relation with the consultations in the mining projects. And that has to be done with all the standards, all the standards of the Agreement 169, the different international agreements, but also thinking that we need to extend this and take this not only to the indigenous communities, but rural communities, and in general, all the communities that have to be represented by the authorities. And this is not enough. It is an instrument that should be put in hands of the relevant actors that are the ones that are living in those places that carry out these productive activities. And we also consider that there is a national vision, a systematic vision of all the environmental areas. And we have used the National Program on Remediation of Soil, and we also have an inventory on the tailings dams, and also the problems and all the activities, and that are the ones that are going to be carried out. And also the joint vision that could be systematized, and we can act in policies. Now, the inventory of these tailings dams We went from 33 to 126, 400. Now we have 585 tailings dam sites that are considered tailings dam. And we are compliant with some of the areas and that we have achieved. And well, we will implement a general policy. We have to go area by area, company by company, and that will be translated into a social responsibility for all the extraction or extractive enterprises or industries. Thank you so much for everyone attending the forum. We hope that with these changes, experiences, exchange of ideas, we can definitely protect and be sustainable, protect our environment, be sustainable. Thank you so much. Thank you, Secretary Herrera. Thank you so much for these words. And thank you for these words and for seeing this in such a systematized way.
So on behalf of SICAN and also on the Canadian Corporation and all the participants here, we would like to thank you not only about the 56 people connected today, but also, of course, the 693 people enrolled in our forum. I would like to thank you, Undersecretary, Deputy Secretary, for your words, and also the backup from the Mexican government to our event. Our last political authority comes from Bogota, but he is from Canada, and he's going to give us a closing words representing the government of Canada. So Mr. Claude Ramirez is an advisor, commercial advisor in the Embassy of Canada in Colombia. Before that position, Claudio performed as the Joint Director for South America in World Affairs Canada, or Asuntos Mundiales Canada, which responsibilities included the countries of Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Uruguay, and the Pacific Alliance. Beforehand, he worked internationally as a regional advisor from the financial economical areas for the Cooperation Council of the Gulf in the Embassy of Canada in the United Arab Emirates. He was also the commercial attaché in the General Consulate of Canada in the United States and second commercial secretary in the Embassy of Canada in Venezuela. Before being part of us as the diplomatic service, he was also assigned to the WHO in Peru and in the United States. Claudio is an economist from the Montreal University. He has a master's in international relations in the University of Amsterdam and a postgraduate degree in public health and human rights from the University of Harvard. Claudio, you are welcome. Please go ahead. The floor is yours. Welcome. My name is Claudio Ramirez. I'm the advisor from the Embassy of Canada in Colombia. And I would like to thank you. And it is my duty now to give you some closing words in this interesting forum organized by SICAN. Of course, I do that on behalf of the Government of Canada and the Ambassador of Canada here in Colombia. And Colombia was chosen because it is a country that has a pro tempore presence of the Pacific Alliance. Personally, I guess they chose me because I represent this merge or fusion of many things. I was born in Chile on July 28th, which is the Independence Day for Peru. And Mexico is a country that one of my favorite countries in terms of structure, etc. And that's why we chose them to celebrate the 70 years of my mother, as a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago. And I'm Canadian, of course. So that's why I think I represent this fusion of collaboration, this merging of all countries, and how fruitful it is, the work in the Pacific Alliance in Canada and everything we're building together. I am not going to take much of your time because I understand that this is just at the conclusion of 4 webinars and a very rich agenda that you had. And I'm not going to repeat things that had already been mentioned by the Best Minister of Canada for the Americas as well. But there are some key points that I would like to maybe mention. The first one, and the follow-up of what I was saying at the very beginning, Canada is a country from the Americas. The Americas is not only our neighborhood, what we share in South America, but we also share the challenges and aspirations in Canada that are part of the Pacific Alliance. We also share values related to equity, gender, sustainability, employment, prosperity. I know that this is a combination of 4 webinars with a very fruitful agenda and conversations with people that are very high level, and among the 4 participating countries on SICAN and the participants from Canada as well. I'm not going to repeat what the Vice Minister of Canada for Americas, Miguel Perez, said at the very beginning of our conference. But there are some points that I would like to mention. The first one is that Canada is certainly from the Americas, and we share with Peru, with Chile, Mexico, and others the same neighborhood, the same challenges, the same values, etc. So that means that we have a defending the human rights and sustainability. Canada is also one of the best investors or largest investors in the mining sector and the extractive area in those 4 countries. And part of our history, we understand that we need to leverage those natural resources and also the economic and social welfare through the inclusion, through dialogue with all different stakeholders, civil society, local communities, indigenous communities, etc. And also in the private sector, of course. Those are the experiences that we are certainly willing to continue collaborating and sharing. Canada is not a model, of course, because being a model means that we're perfect, and we're not perfect. But we think that the mistakes that we have committed and also or made, and the lessons we have learned to link this to prosperity and other issues are important, are relevant, and can be set as examples, or at least things that we can share and identify in the Pacific Alliance. My closing words are to reiterate the commitment we have with the Pacific Alliance. As you know, we are the first non-Latin American country to be the observer in the Pacific Alliance. We are also quite engaged and committed with the cooperation agreements, including this one. And we are going to continue participating as an observer actively in all the agenda we have for the Pacific Alliance to keep building this dialogue that is so productive, constructive. We are going to participate in the cooperation forum with observing countries next week. And we are going to try to be present in all the ministerial summits that are going to be taking place not only this year with the pro tempore Colombia's headship, but also next year when it goes back or goes to Mexico. And finally, we would like to thank SICAN and your good organization of this event, and all of you for participating during these 4 webinars. And looking forward, I'm sure you can still have our support, our government in Ottawa, to build in this support and contribution or input with everything that is being done in the Pacific Alliance. Thank you very much.
Tu micrófono.
Sí. Bueno, eso debía pasar antes.
Well, it had to happen, right? At least once before we close the event. On behalf of SICAN, Claudio, and on behalf also our partners from the Pacific Alliance, I would like to thank your words as well. And also, we would like to make sure we can leverage your presence to thank the Canadian government, because they have trusted SICAN and our partners in Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru for the good use we have given to the 16 million Canadian dollars. Before we finish, I would like to thank everyone, each one of you, because you have been more than willing to be part of this forum. Of course, to each one of our speakers, thank you very much for sharing your time and your competencies that we have really appreciated. I would also like to thank the members of the organizing committee because of their great help in the organization of this forum, and the national coordinations of the countries in the Pacific Alliance in each country for the support and the good development and promotion of this forum and collaboration as liaison with their own departments or ministries. And I would also like to thank my colleagues from SICAN and the companies eCongress and Movisound for their great effort to bring this forward. You will see at the end of this session the names of these people who have been devoted to this great work. You will also see the QR code, which is going to lead us to the satisfaction survey. So just take a couple of seconds to please fill that out, because it's going to be of great help in the future to certainly improve this same event next year. So thank you very much once again.
Merci beaucoup, Chaltomay. Con eso me despido de ustedes y les
Those
deseo.
are my closing words, and have an excellent weekend or end of the day.